And now we return to the 20,000 subscriber Q&A, already in progress. So then I told the guy, that wasn't even my hand lotion. Anyway, that's enough of a warm-up. Welcome to the 20,000 subscriber Q&A special. As you may or may not have noticed, during December I crossed the 20,000 subscriber threshold, and just like I did for 10,000 subscribers a few years ago, I am doing a Q&A, which is also a bit more like what I did about this time last year, where I did another Q&A special, and this Q&A special, like that one, is brought to you by my patrons. Because this is a Q&A that I have done specifically for them. If you have not heard about how to submit questions for this, that's because you're not a supporter on Patreon, and that's fine if you're not, but I do want to give something special out to them, so I opened the floor to them last month for questions, and they came through and provided lots and lots of questions for me to answer today, which I really appreciate. And it's something that you can do too to help support the channel for as little as $1 a month. You'll have access to the private Discord server, and there are rewards going up and up through the various tiers, such as early video access, physical rewards, one-on-one time with me, stuff like that. So that's my little marketing spiel right there, and with that out of the way, I do have a lovely supply of questions right here that I'm going to answer for all of you, starting now. Turbo asks, I know you already answered this to me before, but for everyone who will watch in the video, will you be covering Dragon Ball GT after you finish DBD TV? To be fair, I said it to everybody. I put out a video a couple months ago, The Future of Dragon Ball Dissection, where I talk about exactly what the future of Dragon Ball Dissection will be. It's right there in the title. And I talk about the possibility of covering GT and future Dragon Ball series, and that is still something that is very much up in the air. And it's based on whether or not I can successfully make a living, because I've already devoted, oh god, it's a new year now. I've devoted 9 years of my life to this. So that is something that will become more clear to me as I get closer to that actual deadline. GT, in particular, is certainly more likely to be on the table. It is both less of a time commitment. I won't have to devote multiple years of my life to covering it, most likely, and it's also within the realm of the classic original run of continuous Dragon Ball material, as opposed to Super, which is revival era material that came along much later. So there is a justification for me doing that. Turbo continues on to ask, would you consider covering Fullmetal Alchemist? There are a lot of would you consider doing certain questions or my opinions on certain series, and I never want to give a flat no on anything, because my interests can evolve, and my desire to do things are sparked by my own reaction to certain material. All I can say for right now is as of this moment, I have no familiarity with that series at all. None whatsoever. I have no idea what it's about. I have no idea who the characters are. I know nothing about this series. So I have no plans to cover it at this moment. He continues on to ask, maybe some Transformers / Beast Wars. Again, not quite like Fullmetal Alchemist, but I don't really have much knowledge or interest in Transformers. I had a brief Transformers phase when I was a very young child, maybe around 3, back during Gen 1, and I had a lot of the toys. I think I was more interested in the toys than the series itself. I liked playing, transforming them. But it's one of those things where I have a pretty good memory, even of things that happened when I was a little kid, but I have almost no memory of even watching the Transformers show. So again, I'm not saying that things might not, change in the future, but for right now, that seems extraordinarily unlikely. I have no interest in Transformers whatsoever. SS Jerry says, Lance, I love your dissection of the series. I'm assuming you're talking about Dragon Ball. Seems likely. And thank you. My question to you is, have you spoken to Captain Logan about reading Dragon Ball? Recently, I think I've piqued his interest a bit more. That might be a bit of an insider question, so I think that sort of requires some additional context. For those who don't know, Captain Logan hosts a long-running YouTube channel called Geekvolution, which I recommend if you're into Western comic books of that nature. He has a wonderful series called Superhero Rewind, whose goal is to cover all American superhero movies eventually. Good luck. But it is very highly analytical and the kind of thing you might enjoy if you enjoy the kind of stuff that I do. And he and I go way back because about this time 10 years ago, I was involved in a contest he did called Who Reviews the Reviewers, where I had to do several entries through a sort of single elimination reality show type competition. All those videos are still up on my channel, and my review of the Beatles album Rubber Soul, my Superman the movie The Ending review, all those things from around mid 2010 through mid 2011, or a lot of those are entries in that contest, which I won, and they helped finance my purchase of the final two Dragon box, my final two Dragon Ball Z Dragon boxes, back when they were like $30 or $40. You remember that? I remember that. Nobody seems to remember that. I remember that. As for the question itself, I don't really talk to him about Dragon Ball. I mean, he's made it, clear to me that it's not really one of his interests, and that's fine. I don't tend to push things on people. So no, we have not really talked about that in any great detail, and I couldn't tell you how long. So, I guess good luck with that, but I admit that I don't really have much to do with that at all. But again, for the sake of the plug, go check it out. He's got some good stuff. Winter's King says, do you think that Dragon Ball Super unintentionally changed genres into depressing cosmic horror with the introduction of the top god of the universe, along with just how little hard oversight the gods of destruction actually have from their angels? For me, Super essentially killed the old feeling Dragon Ball had of being a series about good triumphing over evil, with plenty of darkness along the way, and instead became a story about I'm just going to say unpleasant people with too much power doing stupid or unpleasant people things, and no one really doing anything to actually make the universe a better place, instead only focusing on strength for strength's sake. What do you think, you being me? Agree, disagree, or something in between? I have not been shy in expressing some of my disappointments with modern Dragon Ball over the last few years. And even more recently, I have gone to task about the idea of I even named an episode this past year, called "Overloading on Gods," where I discussed my problem with Dragon Ball sort of using later Dragon Ball using gods as a crutch. So to an extent, that does sort of piggyback off of what I said then, and I do think that Dragon Ball has really sort of hitched its wagon to gods so strongly in Dragon Ball Super that really kind of stuck there. Again, as far as I've seen and read up to this point, I don't really know what happens beyond the Tournament of Power at the moment. But at least in that regard, every single storyline in Dragon Ball Super up to that point heavily involves gods, and it feels kind of wedged into that niche, and having nowhere to go. But that said, that a lot of the gods that Super has introduced, character-wise and function-wise, are a huge improvement over some of the gods and arbitrary god tiers that classic Dragon Ball has done. Because you have a god of destruction. That is an actual role, and his personality feeds into that role, and it feels much more like an actual thought-out pantheon, where as opposed to the Buu arc, where it's like, oh, we had this other layer of gods who we don't know what they do, and this layer on top of that we don't really know what they do, and then there's the head of him and we don't know what that. It's all very vague. People seem to jump down my throat for that video and say, well, look, Japan has lots of gods, and it's normal to them, or Greeks have lots of gods. The problem is not necessarily the number in and of itself. It's just this huge layer of completely ill-defined gods. I'm getting a little bit off the point here, I suppose. I don't know if I necessarily agree. To an extent, there's always a thread of sort of anarchic comedy in Dragon Ball that is very very irreverent and ties in around terrible people doing terrible things. But it's always sort of balanced out by a good versus evil mentality, and certainly I've made my own complaints in later parts of the original series that it sometimes tends to veer off into the weeds. But I wouldn't say that Dragon Ball Super is necessarily too far off from that regular tone. I think, if anything, in certain instances, it's not horrific enough. I think I've said many times that the Tournament of Power, one of my problems with that, is that the story by its nature is very horrific and very morally ambiguous. That you have all these universes that are going to be wiped out of existence, and the only way you can survive is to ensure that happens to everybody else. That is horrific and gut-wrenching, and the series never really capitalizes on that. And that's not me saying that Dragon Ball can or should be grim dark, just that the story they're telling and the tone they're using are kind of incompatible in certain ways, and that has been a problem. So I hope that more or less gets my thoughts on that out. Moving right along, Darth Medios says, great to see this. I love audience engagement content. Thank you. Do more stuff with us on the Discord, a game night, a group watch, or just a chat. You know, that's fair enough. I do tend to pop into the Discord when I get a chance to, but I'm not a huge social butterfly or creator of party events, and I'm still kind of learning Discord overall in that sense. So, I would not mind trying that out and seeing how it goes if I feel I have any competence in doing so. I guess it's difficult just in the sense that sometimes first of all, it feels like whenever I pop into the Discord is when it's not, a lot of the times it seems like it's not really a peak time for it. And so there's nobody there to talk to anyway, so I'll put out something and nobody will respond and then I'll leave. But that's not even his question, so let's move on to that. Anyway, my question: if you were put in the driver's seat at Toei and can make one original story arc for Dragon Ball, set anywhere, anytime, even if it conflicts with Super or GT, what would you do? Well, I just wouldn't make more Dragon Ball. And don't say, I just wouldn't make more Dragon Ball. I really hate you right now. I just want you to know that. All right. This is not usually my cup of tea. I can sometimes offer up my humble ideas of what an existing story could tweak to, but I don't necessarily like to jump in and say this is a story Dragon Ball should tell. But I actually did put some thought into this, and it might be the thing I had to put the most thought into. And I was just pacing around my house thinking, God, what would a Dragon Ball story be that I want to tell? So don't try to say I didn't put in the work for you here, because I did finally come up with something that I kind of liked, which is funny because it's a character I've always complained about, or at least expressed a certain amount of apathy towards. I would like to see something about Lunch. As much as I think she's a one-note character, I would love to see a story that focuses with her as the main character, with both of her as the main characters. And it's definitely something I would be repelled from a story that tries to give an origin story for Lunch that explains why she is two different people. That takes away all the fun, in my opinion, and I really sort of back away from we have to explain where everything comes from, because it's much more fun to just imagine that yourself and to not have any concrete answers. But no, what I would like is more of a just getting to see how they live. And I'm going to keep using they from now on because it really is two separate people, and be exploring that dichotomy, because it is kind of like it's something that never really dives into the psychology of that. Now, Dragon Ball's not that kind of story, but it would just be hilarious, because it's sort of like half this kind of weird Memento-esque situation where, because every time she sneezes, it's this joint ownership of this body in a sense, where one of them just fades out and the other one takes over. And so from each one's perspective, there's just a block of time that just is cut out. where each one makes decisions that the other one has to sort of reconcile and just come back and go, oh, why am I here? What am I doing right now? Well, I guess it's time to keep going. And so just even having like a day in the life kind of thing, and like, this is how she holds down a job, this is how she does household chores, I think it'd be a lot of, sorry, I was backtracked, how they do household chores, how they hold down a job, how they, function, and how their each one's decision affects the life and circumstances of the other. I think would be a lot of fun. Grave Robert Jake says, while I understand most of your content is Dragon Ball related, strictly speaking, that is true, but I'd say roughly just over half of my content is Dragon Ball related. There is lots of other stuff out there that I really think you'd enjoy watching, so please make sure you're watching my stuff that's not Dragon Ball, that's roughly 48% of my content. Please. While I understand most of your content is Dragon Ball related, what are your thoughts on some other anime and manga from that era? Such as Yu Yu Hakusho, Sailor Moon, Trigun, Rurouni Kenshin, Strike Witches, Wolves Rain, or Cowboy Bebop. That is a long list. So let's just go down through each of them. Yu Yu Hakusho. I think I saw the first episode when it first came on Toonami. Didn't watch anything beyond that, so I have no flipping clue. I have no opinion on it whatsoever. Sailor Moon. Actually, I'm not a huge Moonie. Although I do have a Sailor Moon calendar right there. Then I need to remind myself to get a shot of to put in this video. It needs to be replaced now that it's 2021. I've watched all of the first series in Japanese. A few months ago I got the first volume of the manga and I read that. It's something I've always enjoyed and feel a kinship towards. I've talked about Sailor Moon on I think probably on my last Q&A too. Like that would be something that I would love to cosplay as. I enjoy the magical girl tropes, even if I'm a little bit warded away by its monster of the week formula kind of thing. But I enjoy it. Like, what's the next here? Probably the most of this list I'm gonna have anything to say about. Trigun, never seen it. I have no idea what it's about. Rurouni Kenshin, same thing. Strike Witches, never even heard of it. Wolves Rain, never heard of that. Or Cowboy Bebop. Okay, I have a little bit of experience with Cowboy Bebop. That was one of those, I think, when, it had a lot of name value recognition when I was a teenager, and when Adult Swim first started up, it's something I wanted to check out. The problem is that Adult Swim was on past my bedtime, so I wasn't really allowed to see it, but I did have a TV in my room, that TV right there, actually. And so, on occasion, I think the first few nights it was on, maybe, I did sneak out of bed and try to catch a glimpse of it with the TV down really, really low. Hopefully, my mom wouldn't hear. There was an additional wrinkle to that, though, and that's that when I was a teenager, I exclusively wore contact lenses, and I wore hard lenses too. And once, besides the fact that they were in the bathroom instead of my room, once they were out for the night, they were out. They were not, you could not put them back in. And I have really, really terrible eyesight. So if you want to picture it, it was me in a darkened room looking at this tiny TV about this far away from it, just squinting really hard trying to make out what was going on. I think I had fun, but I think I remember that experience more than I remember anything about the show itself. It certainly was not something that became a habit of mine. I did it a couple of times, and then I was just like, I think I'd just rather sleep rather than go through this torture. And I never really picked it back up again, so... Seth Stanley asks, how do you feel about Goku Black as a character, and what are some of your thoughts on some of the best dark counterparts throughout fiction and the trope as a whole? I find it interesting that those two questions are put together, connected in a sense, because, I think that Goku Black, or rather Zamasu, is perhaps probably the best villain that Dragon Ball Super has done that I have experienced so far. But the thing is I don't really consider him to be a dark counterpart in any tangible sense. He's really not. At least, not in any more sense than you could say Captain Ginyu is a dark counterpart. He's just somebody who has taken Goku's body. So he could look like anybody. There's really no connection there, no real connection in that character. It's really just there for the shock value of, oh, this guy looks like Goku is taking over the future. But not really much is done with it. I mean, Tullus is much more of a dark Goku. And even that doesn't really amount to much more than, tricking Gohan for a few seconds. Thematically, it's kind of there, but at the same token, it's not really something where you couldn't have just swapped him out with anybody else and the story wouldn't have changed all that much. So, I don't know, really the biggest dark counterparts I can think of tend to be from Star Trek. They sort of codified the whole idea of a dark parallel universe that has dark parallel versions of our characters, and obviously Spock with a goatee is sort of the go-to image most people have in their heads of a dark mirror counterpart. But I don't know. I love the the DS9 versions because they the original series went to the mirror universe once. The DS9 ended up doing it more or less once a season. Did a mirror universe storyline. And so obviously the one that sticks out the most for most people in that series is Intendant Kira, the dark version of Major Kira from that show. For character reasons, and people tend to gravitate to her for fetishistic reasons too, because she is very much a sexual character. But just that sense of relishing in being evil that she really gets down very well. Probably stands out above all the other mirror versions of characters. Although, of course, it's funny that in terms of the Ferengi characters in that show, the mirror versions tend to be much more selfless and altruistic than their original counterparts, and they all tend to die in very horrific ways because of that. There's that. And that's really all. I have nothing against the idea of a dark counterpart, and I think it can elucidate what you like or don't like about the prime example, as it were. All right, moving on to the second page here already. In your opinion, Joel asks, in your opinion, do you feel Dragon Ball Super is better done as movies, aka Battle of Gods, Broly, or do you think Super was a mess because of the lack of Toriyama and super production? Do you feel it can still be good as long as Toriyama becomes more involved and isn't overwhelmed? I don't know exactly what he brings to the table in all of this. I don't know if him being there more would be an improvement or not. I'm sort of neutral on the idea of Toriyama in general, if this is something that has to happen, to any degree. Toriyama does seem to have a knack, generally speaking, for sort of flying by the seat of his pants and just sort of doing what he finds exciting. And as much as you could generally say that planning is good for a story, I don't know if Toriyama does it well enough that it's not just tying his own hands behind his back and taking away his greatest strength as a storyteller, which is to excite people on the fly. So I think that's sort of been something of a problem. That's just my opinion, though. I don't know if it really is. And I don't know if I can really categorically say whether it'd be better as movies or a TV series or not. Because I've enjoyed some of the movies and some of the movies I haven't enjoyed, and I can say the same for the series. I think that if they do a series, they should do it right and not rush into it like they did with Super. But I still sort of tend to be influenced by the fact that I would just say, just stop, please, just stop. But a good story is a good story no matter where it comes from, and no matter if it's a series or a movie, and so I can't just strictly say one would be better than the other. Diego Diaz says, thank you for inspiring me for creating my own dissection series called, Gundam Dissection. Are you a fan of Gundam? Have you watched Evangelion, and do you ever plan to watch seasonal anime? Well, I'm happy to have inspired you, and I'm glad your series is doing well, and that's fantastic. I've never been much of a Gundam fan. I watched a little bit of Gundam Wing when it was on Toonami. I own Gundam Wing Endless Waltz on DVD. It's somewhere. I have no idea where it even is anymore. it was something that I was never really into. I didn't even see enough of Gundam Wing to really even understand Endless Waltz. So I don't even know why I even have it, but I did enjoy watching that movie for all that it had an impact on me. I've never seen Evangelion, and seasonal is so broad, I don't really know what that would entail. I don't not have a plan there, so I hope that answers that. Alexander asks, if you could change just one thing in the original Dragon Ball manga, excluding Super/GT, in regards to the plot from any arc, without majorly changing the overall story, what change would you make and why would you want to see that change? I still think that the whole evil Vegeta and the Buu arc thing would just require some minor tweaking to to sell that idea, and I've talked about that already, which is I don't think Vegeta needs to be completely, as culpable as he is. Just, don't take his responsibility away, but just tweak it enough that, either he is not completely responsible or that there is more of something more that snaps him out of that. That, people have tried to argue in the following video that, the fight is supposed to be underwhelming because it's supposed to be underwhelming for Vegeta. Well, it shouldn't be underwhelming for the audience, but I can get on board with the idea that it should be underwhelming for Vegeta. I think there needs to be more of a realization of, wow, I got what I wanted, and this isn't working for me, kind of thing. Because the way it is in the series, just kind of like, okay, I'll stop fighting now. Time to be good again, and none of that really sells for me. So I think if you just tweaked it, it would be the iconic moment that a lot of people seem to remember it as. All right, Morgan asks, and I like this one, who would look better in a skirt, Raditz or Vegeta? I like these questions. Okay, there's an art to this, I think. There is an art to this, and I think part of me wants to say Vegeta because he is a bit more svelte. He's a bit smaller and more petite, if you will. You can't deny, though, that Raditz has much better legs. But the reason I would ultimately say Vegeta is because Raditz is already rocking like the bikini briefs, and so all a skirt would do would be to hide more of those fabulous legs. So, while they would both look fantastic in a skirt, if I had to choose one, I think it would be Vegeta. And that's the definitive answer. All right, Who Can Pelican asks, picking a question is hard considering how open and available you have been on the Discord for questions, which is really cool, by the way. You see, Darth Medios, I am open and available on Discord. I agree with both of you. I will try to be more available than I currently have been. But there's a question here too, not just me being self-congratulatory through other people's words. Is there anything in a previous episode of Dragon Ball Dissection that you no longer agree with, or is there anything you wish you approached differently or elaborated on more? There's not a lot. I mean, I'm sure there are things. I mean, there's over 114 episodes of Dragon Ball Dissection. There's certainly mistakes that I have made. I still kind of cringe at what I did get wrong about Mount Paozu back in the DBD TV Saiyan arc, and that even my correction didn't completely address, because it is still mentioned within the Z anime even after the location changes. And it only bugs me because it's something that I am sort of passionate about, and something that most people don't seem to realize is a thing that's not in the original Dragon Ball manga series. So me sort of dropping the ball on that is something that I've never really lived down, even though I don't think it's not really that big of a deal objectively. But something else is that, to an extent, I stand by my scoring system, and it does kind of befuddle me to this day that so many people are confused by it. But on that same token, I did kind of mess it up when I first introduced it, because I did call it a ranking system instead of a scoring system. I did have each number followed by a period in the first two arcs, which makes it look like, that kind of ranking system, the way it's laid out like that. I did that just to be visible. And it wasn't until either the Red Ribbon or after the Red Ribbon, I can't remember if it was before or after that I sort of cottoned on to the idea that I was presenting it very poorly, and did make sure to be very insistent in my own terminology, calling it scoring instead of ranking, changing it to a dash after the numbers instead of a period. And referring to it as blank out of 10, blank out of 10. This arc gets a score of, 9 out of 10, of 3 out of 10, of what have you. To make that very, very clear. And I think for the most part it has helped, but I feel like the damage had already been done by that point, and there was really no walking that back. So while I still think it works, I did not help that matter, and I kind of wish that I had been a bit clearer on that from the beginning. Arterhauser asks, do you enjoy dissecting Dragon Ball more than you enjoy the series on its own merits? Seems to me like deconstructing DB is a 10 out of 10 experience for you. 10 out of 10, see, he gets it. While actually watching/reading it is like a 7. There's nothing wrong with enjoying something for reasons unintended by the author, death of the author and stuff, but I always wondered if that was actually the case for you. This might surprise you, but actually no. I enjoy both for different reasons. I certainly enjoy analyzing media that I like. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. But I wouldn't say that I enjoy it more than simply reading or watching it. In fact, it's gotten to the point where I kind of miss getting to do that for fun. And it's like, you could say, well, you could still do that. And to a small extent that I can, but you have to understand that when Dragon Ball is something that I've invested so much time into making these videos, it's much rarer that in my free time I want to enjoy Dragon Ball. I kind of, if I'm not working on Dragon Ball, I want to do things that aren't Dragon Ball. So it has kind of monopolized my time in that sense, as much as I enjoy it. So that I do miss just getting to sit down and open my manga and just read it for fun, to the point where in the past week or so, I have finally, that's part of the reason why I did not read Dragon Ball Super, because it felt like a chore enough just watching it every week, that I was already, reading Dragon Ball, already doing my watch through, taking notes for DBD TV. I was already watching Dragon Ball Super on a weekly basis. Just felt like a chore. But I finally got to the point in the past week where I did sit down and start reading Dragon Ball Super. And I made it clear on my Twitter, which is where I've been collecting, like when I've been watching Dragon Ball GT or I've been watching Dragon Ball Super, I've been doing episode by episode, here are my thoughts on it, where I said, look, I'm just doing this for fun. I'm not going to be exhaustively taking notes per episode. I'm just doing this to enjoy myself. Casually, completely casually. And I'm doing that right now, and I'm having a decent time. So no, I don't think I enjoy one more than the other. I think there needs to be a balance in my life, where I enjoy dissecting Dragon Ball, to be sure, but there is something that feels less like work to just sort of sit down and enjoy it. I still have the same thoughts, but the same critical thinking skills are at play here, but I'm not necessarily having to analyze them and put them into words that would hopefully make sense to other people. So it's been very satisfying to do that, because it helps me understand my own thoughts better than just feeling them. But it is a lot of work. Patrick asks, is there anything in the Funimation dub or Viz translation that you think improves on the Japanese original? As much as I'll go to my grave saying the title of the series is Dragon Ball Kai, I do agree that calling it Dragon Ball Z Kai, as weird as that sounds, makes more sense. So there's that. I did always remember that there's a moment, where when Trunks first appears and he slashes through all of Frieza's henchmen, the dub actually does make that a silent, like it cuts to black and they're all like the sword swipe, images on there. Funimation, in a rare moment, doesn't use any music there, and I think that actually plays better than the original version. That's all I can think of right now. Caleb here is coming with the hard-hitting questions. You stated before that you wanted to wear dresses ever since you were a kid, but weren't allowed to. How did you feel during your childhood and teen years not being able to express who you are? That is a very good question. I didn't say hard-hitting to mean that I don't appreciate them. I really do, actually. There's just a lot to unpack here, and I'm happy to do so. At least do my best to do so. I would be lying if I said it didn't affect me at all. But at the same time, I don't necessarily felt I had the kind of pronounced struggle that a lot of gender variant children seem to feel. And so I can only speak for myself when I say this, but I think to an extent, children are doing their best to understand how the world works. And it's enough to just know the rules sometimes, so you don't really have the capacity necessarily to question them, especially if there's no kind of counterexample. I'm not saying I never questioned anything, but I knew from a young age that simply wasn't something that boys did. So it wasn't so much that anybody said you can't do this directly. It wasn't like my mom said, caught me in a dress and said you're not allowed to do that. It was just something that I knew. I watched television. I had enough of a grasp on the culture around me to understand that it just simply was not done, without having to necessarily be reprimanded for it directly. So in that sense, it was something that I knew I had an interest in, but it was never really nurtured or cultivated. And in terms of those rules I talk about, it's like, when you're a child, you learn, like, you might have really outlandish dreams, like, I want to jump off the roof and flap my arms and fly across the street, and you realize that simply is not possible. But you not necessarily have the nuance to always understand what is possible and what is just not acceptable. So I don't think I really questioned it all that much. I simply took it as one of those things that is just the way it is. So it was something that I kind of buried in myself, repressed to an extent. I knew it was there, but I didn't really waste a lot of time thinking about it too much. I even recall when I was a little kid, there was a period where I would refuse to listen to any girl commercials. The jingles would get stuck in my head, and I would feel really weird about that. And it was just not the way I was supposed to be. So I jumped onto the bandwagon for a while myself. It wasn't until I was an adult that that suddenly I devoted some time to thinking about it, and in a sense of nothing is actually stopping me from doing this. We're not in the age where laws are so restrictive, and it's certainly not something that is physically impossible. And so once I started to think about it in those terms, that's suddenly when it sort of opened up this world for me in order to do it. And so it wasn't until college I started actually wearing skirts and feminine clothes publicly and incorporating them into my wardrobe, and sort of having to to start from a place a lot of people figure out through childhood, having to figure out fashion aspects in my adulthood. So I definitely had a lot of a steep learning curve to figure out. The next part of this question is, once you became an adult and started to wear women's clothing, how did your family feel about your lifestyle? That one is that's a bit of a thing. And the sad thing is that I don't even really have an answer for that in a comprehensive sense. There are some people that I knew that were just minced no words how they felt about it. It definitely caused a rift between my mother and me. Rift is not the right word because we still had a regular relationship, but it caused a lot of tension for the last 7 years or so. Obviously, it's not an issue anymore, but it certainly was, and I'm kind of sad that it was never something we really ever managed to come to common ground about. I mean, there were times, it was something that was not always direct. Usually over the phone, she would refer to it as "quote unquote" my weirdness, and just try to avoid it in a sense. Or otherwise be more direct and denigrate me over it, or start fights with me about it, which was never fun. But by that point, I lived far away anyway, so it really didn't affect me on a day-to-day basis. It was just something I kind of had to put up with. But I certainly remember, over the summer before she passed away, I remember I had posted a picture of myself on Facebook in a bikini, and she commented saying that she thought I looked cute. So I think she was trying. It just was kind of something that she really struggled with. It's complicated. It is complicated, and I don't. For anybody who is curious about that, or curious about how their own, if they are curious about this for their own lives, and want to know, how it goes. It had this weird feeling around people who knew you when you were very, very young, and who you sort of feel have a certain impression of you. It's really easy for me to be in my current adult life and to meet new people and to be exactly, completely me. I feel no shame. I feel no embarrassment about that. And it's like, take me or leave me. But when you get to people who knew you as a child and who've known you for your entire life, then suddenly it just, you feel like there's a certain mold that you fit into. And it can be difficult to try to break away from that. All right, and here's the last part of Caleb's question, which is surprisingly the most difficult of them all. Last question, what do you exactly identify as? Male, non-binary, other. And you would think that'd be the easiest one, but it is something that I, for the last few years, have tended to ignore whenever it comes up to me, because I feel like it's become a bit more of a status influx for me. Sometimes there isn't a real concrete answer. I am me. I am exactly who I am, and I am comfortable in exactly who I am, even if I don't necessarily know exactly what label I want to affix to that person. But I think it's certainly important. But I do think it's less important than me being comfortable with me, and I certainly am that. So to anybody out there who's not sure where they fit into the world, obviously be careful, because it is still a very dangerous place out there, and I feel that I've been very lucky, luckier than a lot of people, while my circumstances aren't perfect. I've certainly encountered my share of problems, both familial and personally, and just out in the real world. I certainly have not had a lot of the problems other people have, a lot of the horrible, horrific things that other people have gone through. And I'm usually a pretty confident enough person that I can handle the idiots who come my way. I'm used to this. This is nothing new. This has been since 2006. So I'm pretty established as to what I do and how I do it, and to being unapologetically me. It's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world to, in any sense, break away from what's considered the norm, because we are very judgmental people, and I'm sure you've seen some of those people in my comments, and that's not fine. It's not okay. It is not even remotely okay. But it is unfortunately something that we kind of have to live with. So, but by all means, I don't think that it is worth kowtowing to those individuals, those closed-minded individuals who aren't going to approve of you anyway, as opposed to being yourself. I will always champion you being you 10 times out of 10. And I definitely think it's an important and worthy journey, no matter where that journey takes you. Even if you are comfortably cisgendered, exploring exactly who you are and whether the things you do and the ways you present yourself are because of your own personal tastes or because they have been imposed upon you is certainly something that everybody should take some time to reflect on. Scott asks, which characters in Dragon Ball do you feel had the most wasted potential? I think I've more or less covered this in various Dragon Ball dissection episodes, but I did just get done talking about what else could be done with lunch, so I guess there's technically one right there. I've always said that I feel like Yamcha had a lot of potential, but his character arc was resolved in the first storyline, and then he just had nowhere else to go. And, it's hard to say about Chaozu because he's one who really didn't get explored enough to know if he had potential to begin with, so it's hard to tell if it was wasted per se. I don't know. I'd say aside from maybe Goku, Vegeta, Bluma, and maybe Kuririn, I say most of the characters have a reasonable case to be made that their potential was wasted. And I think Kuririn is a rare example of one who was sort of languishing for a little bit and then sort of got repackaged as this lovelorn everyman and took on a much greater dimension later on. So there's that. And continuing on from Scott, he asks, on the topic of wasted potential, of your lower ranked arcs, lower scored arcs, we've been through this, want to make sure I don't confuse anybody. Let's say any of the bottom 5, what would you have changed to improve them? Well, again, that's more or less covered in Dragon Ball dissection, but just briefly, starting from the score of 5, that'd be Frieza. I think I've said that it gets kind of lost and muddied in its fighting, which goes on for too long and is damaged by the fact that since Frieza can transform at will, a lot of the earlier parts of the fighting seem kind of pointless. He could just skip to the end and it'd be a heck of a lot shorter. Number 4 is 23rd Budokai, score of 4. I did it myself. I don't really know what else could be done with that. I mean, there's nothing really wrong with it per se. It's just I think the format was getting a little bit tired by that point, and my main problem was that it felt a little bit locked in. That all the characters were people we knew, and there was no room to breathe. I don't really know how you could have fixed that, given the story it was trying to tell. You could either the only ones who weren't really connected to the specific plot in some way were Chi-Chi and Tao Pai Pai. But you'd be sacrificing Goku's and Ten Shinhan's stories if you were to drop them. So that one's a bit tougher. Cell, which is the score of 3. No, I think I've said that I think in order to have the payoff that it has, Gohan needed to not have been such a minor player throughout the majority of it, and the sacrificial lamb needed to be a character we cared about. 2 was Piccolo. I think I've been pretty outspoken in saying that it retreads a lot of the Red Ribbon Army ground, but without any of the sort of earned. This doesn't feel as earned as it did there. I think the henchmen needed to have more personality. It really does start the trend of characters just feeling like they exist in the background. You have the whole Kame House crew just kind of exist and are there to listen to events on the TV and radio, and it's not terribly compelling. But I'm not going to do Boo because I'm currently working on Boo, and that would sort of give part of the game away. So I hope you understand that, and I'm going to move on now. Thank you, Scott. So, Vorphile's Restaurant says, I have two. One, do you feel any urge to redo any of your previous arcs or videos? Two, how do you pace yourself to best avoid burnout? Okay, so for the first one, I do like to see my progress. But at the same time, it's hard to deny that I have, at least I hope I've improved in certain aspects in terms of having the capacity to make more professional looking videos. And I'm sure there are bits of writing I've shored up on. Maybe there are things I could have been a bit more detailed in. But I don't really necessarily want to look backwards. So it's a kind of a yes and no thing. Although I do feel part of the reason why videos are more detailed now is simply that context I'm always talking about. When there's more context to delve into, the more detailed it can be. So it's like, for example, I couldn't really have an in-depth discussion about Bluma and Yamcha's relationship until that relationship had exhausted all of its material. Then I could sort of go back and examine it from the beginning. It's kind of a consequence of the way I'm handling things, but I certainly think that there are things I could have or should have gone into more detail of. I just can't think of anything off the top of my head. As for the second one, how do I pace myself? Well, part of it is doing other things besides Dragon Ball dissection. I've never considered myself a Dragon Ball channel. I've never considered myself a Dragon Ball YouTuber. I've always done things that were not Dragon Ball. I say kicking and screaming into the void. I had my channel going consistently for 3 years almost before I ever did Dragon Ball dissection. So I think keeping a sort of variety does help keep me from being burned out. But also, especially now that I'm doing this full time, I had to make a very rigid work-life balance for myself, especially working from home and doing a lot of things in this office. It's easy to sort of have that line blur, and so having a very rigid, disciplined schedule, saying this is the moment I stop working, and only really break it in emergencies, has helped keep me from burning out too. To just be able to give myself permission to stop working, and that's something that was definitely a big transitional shift, and that was part of why I was getting to a point where I was burned out before when I was doing this on the side, because it felt like every free moment I had to be devoted to keeping the channel going. And now I'm allowed to say, all right, I'm stopping work for the day. I'm not going to think about it or do anything with it until tomorrow. And that definitely helps. All right. Sergio asks, there are usually philosophical debates about the society and universe of Star Trek. I'm curious about your opinion on them. 1, do you think it is a utopia, dystopia, or neither of the two? That's difficult because utopia by its very definition is unattainable, but also it is so uniquely subjective in the eye of the beholder as to what a utopia would be. One person's perfection is another person's nightmare. Overall, I think that the Trek universe is an improvement and something that we should be striving towards. It certainly tries to demonstrate a future where everybody on Earth have put aside their differences and have the opportunity to explore the best parts of themselves and explore their own talents and what fulfills them. And I think that is, in a very broad sense, something that we should all be able to get behind. But I do tend to agree with one of my favorite Star Trek reviewers, SF Debris, who once said that the original series painted out those broad strokes we could all get behind. Then suddenly, when you get into the original revival era of Trek, the 80s through 2005, where it starts getting where Gene Roddenberry had more of a free hand and was able to really get into the details of that. Individual people might not agree with those specifics, and it might be a little bit harder to latch onto. And you can't deny that, especially season 1 of TNG was incredibly preachy. and even with stuff that I personally ascribe to, like what was it, Lonely Among Us, where it had the delegates, and you have like Riker and Troy just scoffing at the idea that these aliens could eat animals, enslave animals. They said, and I'm a vegetarian, so of course I sympathize with that, but they're just like so condescending about the whole thing. And season 1 TNG was a very condescending show about anything that 80s middle America might find enjoyable or worthy. The neutral zone is another episode that just really just, oh, look at these primitive humans and how terrible they are for having money and stuff. And that kind of surprised me getting into Trek, even before I got into anything beyond the original series. You get to Star Trek 4 and suddenly, Kirk is saying, oh, they use money in this era. We need to find some. Where I was like, what? There's no money in Star Trek? Because the original series seemed to have money all the time. Uhura and Chekhov bought tribbles. Kirk makes references to Starfleet paying them. All of a sudden there was no money, and it just kind of blindsided me. And not that I, in principle, am against the idea, to an extent. But it did just, for me, it kind of came out of nowhere. And then with TNG got really preachy with it, and DS9 tried to sort of poke a little fun at that. So I think whether or not it's a utopia depends on how you feel about the kinds of I guess it kind of depends on how you feel about socialism, honestly, because a lot of Star Trek is very much an idealized version of what people want socialism to be, and so it really comes down to that. This is a bit more. His second question is a bit more tied into the tech. Do you think teleporting requires dying, or is it something we could survive? Because there's a lot of talk about how the transporter in Star Trek could really work if whether or not it's putting you back together again, or if it's computerizing, keeping a record of your pattern and then rebuilding you from scratch if you really are the same person again. And that's, I don't know, that's a bit difficult for me to give any kind of authoritative answer on, because it's not real, so it just kind of works however the story wants it to. I don't know if I don't know if it'd be possible, theoretically possible, given how it works in the franchise. I think it'd be. I would like to hope that there would be a case where we could develop something like that. I think it'd be a lot of fun, except when it doesn't work, in which case it's horrific. But honestly, I mean, there are enough fun applications of transporter technology that would be fantastic, like how it can turn you into a kid, like in Rascals. And then turn you back into an adult again based on your pattern, or if you get turned really, really old, as happens in both the animated series and in TNG, then the transporter pattern will remember where you were before and make you back the way you were before again. That's fantastic. So there are a lot of transporter applications besides being turned into a puddle of goo that I think would be really, I would really enjoy had I gotten the chance to play with it. All right, Sergio continues, and to be fair, unlike my last Q&A, I did not specifically limit these to one question per person. So, this video is going to be like 2 hours long, isn't it? In relation to GT, would it have seemed right to you if Goku had killed Pan when Chi Shenlong possessed her? I think I'm stating that right. I recently just did a watch through of GT, my first full watch through of GT, and I'm still pronouncing Chinese names is kind of difficult for me. I think it's Chi Shenlong, but I've already forgotten. A, in universe ethically speaking, or B, in a narrative sense. And it's already at the point where I don't remember enough details to, I don't know if I can answer that properly. Ethically speaking, yes, I think so. Aside from the fact that Dragon Balls do exist and could be used once this crisis is over to fix that, then were it necessary, and even Pan, who's just a little girl, recognized the necessity for defeating the monster over saving her own life. So yeah, I don't see anything. I mean, it is a terrible moral choice to have to make, but I think that it is justified. And you brought up Star Trek, so hey, needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few in certain cases, to be sure. But moving along to narrative. Then yeah, giving the hero a moral choice to have to make in a quandary that is going to that is going to cause pain either way. That's perfect for a narrative. So yeah, I think that it was a good choice. I think it was solved too easily. If I recall, that Goku just happened to seem to know how to best solve that, and like did this big fake out where the moral choice really wasn't there at all. Just I was able to pull her out. I knew you were going to do this exact thing when you thought you defeated me. So that was it wasn't paid off terribly well. Sergio continues. Did you think that any of the arcs in the series were as good as some of the originals or GT as a whole? Probably not. I mean, perhaps the overall Baby and Dragon Ball hunt might be on par with at least some of the weaker storylines of Dragon Ball, at the very least. It's something, just with GT and with Super, I don't know them like the back of my hand, so it's hard for me to give a really reasoned, and that might change in the future. As opposed to a Dragon Ball dissection where I have thoroughly written out my thoughts and examined them in a series that I know really, really well and I had plenty of time to think about and come to terms with. But I'd say it's experimental enough that it holds my interest. But I think that in a general sense it does not compare to even the weaker arcs of the original Dragon Ball. Perhaps. And Sergio continues. In relation to DB in general, what do you think about Dragon Ball Evolution? Well, I meant what I said in Dragon Ball Minus, where I said that was the worst thing to carry the Dragon Ball name. Dragon Ball Minus was. And I got a lot of questions saying, what about Dragon Ball Evolution? I'm like, yeah, I know what I said. I had seen Dragon Ball Evolution. I saw it. I didn't see it until, I think, 2015. And around the same time I saw Resurrection F, and I enjoyed it better than that. It's one of those things where it doesn't bother me in principle that it barely resembles Dragon Ball in a lot of ways. I don't think that an adaptation, a standalone work that is an adaptation of an existing property is required to be exactly like the source material, as long as it's good on its own. I wouldn't say that I loved it, but I had a better time than I did watching Resurrection F, I can tell you that. And when you come down to it, that's really the only bar it needs to clear. And finally, Extra. Have you ever watched Neon Genesis Evangelion? I think I answered that already, but no. No, I have not. Alright, Joel is back. I believe it's the same Joel from earlier. How do you feel towards Goku's characterization in Super? I've seen a lot of people compare him to his kid version, trying to make sense of it, but I always felt, in a sense, he grew out of that mindset to a degree in later arcs like in Cell and Buu. People say, what's the problem? This is originally how Goku was made to be, but I feel like it gets ignored that he does change in later arcs, but they simply choose to ignore it either because they prefer Kid Goku more or think this is how he is fully meant to be. How do you feel on the matter? It's funny, I think I actually weighed in on this on the Kanzenshu forums a few days ago. But no, I agree with that. I think part of the problem with Super Goku is that he's been kind of reduced to a single note. And that note is goofy and upbeat and hey, wow, waku waku, I'm so excited to be fighting somebody, And GT did that to an extent too. I remember when Mozilla Vulpix, Gabby, did GT, watched her around the same time I was doing mine, although she finished hers much more quickly. She actually had a waku waku counter for how many times Goku expresses his excitement to be fighting somebody. But I do think you can see a very jarring shift between Goku from the end of Dragon Ball in terms of his tone, as opposed to Dragon Ball Supers, where he does seem much less mature. Of course, Goku is always silly and always has a degree of recklessness to him, but he certainly knows how to get serious when necessary. I mean, like, he had to tell Goten and Trunks, not too far from where we are in Dragon Ball Dissection right now. They're crying about Gohan supposedly being dead, and he has to just yell at them to just suck it up and get on with, get to work. So he knew how to be serious and knew how to be mature and put aside personal feelings to handle a situation. Whereas Dragon Ball Super's Goku is just a big old happy goofball all the time and never really seems to understand the situation of anything he's in. And it is quite frustrating that there's really no balance to his character anymore. Let's see. Goliath-sama asks, 1, any other anime series that you have a deep affinity for? Like maybe list a few and explain why they mean something if you could, please. So that's the first question. There are a couple more as well on a different page, so I'm going to get to that in a second. People have asked me about specific anime in this Q&A up till now, but I haven't really gotten to talk about ones that I have cared for in this one, although I think I might have in prior Q&As. I was a big Tenchi Muyo fan. I was especially into the OVA more so than the TV adaptations. It was just a fun group of characters. It's obviously a type of harem series, for lack of a better term. You have a central male figure surrounded by a bunch of beautiful women who seem to all like him for some reason and won't leave him alone. But it also had some interesting action elements too, and I just, as a teenager, I was really into it. And in fact, the first DVD I ever owned was the first Tenchi Muyo theatrical movie. So it certainly holds a special place in my video collection, if nothing else. I was so excited when I got this wonderful DVD box set of the original 2 OVA series. It was a really premium packaging kind of thing, and I loved that. I was introduced to it through Toonami, and I remember being a teenager, I was interested in seeing what episode 4, the Hot Springs episode, looked like, because I could tell it was being censored, and I just went to Suncoast and picked up that tape. And was just terrified that I was going to get stopped at the register by someone who, who knew better. But you're a kid and you think too much about this stuff. Nobody cares. So I really enjoyed that one. I also was big into Ranma 1/2. I thought it was really really cool to be able to switch between girl and a boy whenever you wanted to. Imagine that. So I had a. Back when these things were really expensive, I had a $100 DVD box set of Ranma 1/2 that ended up with my ex fiance, and I never got that back. But I still have all the volumes of manga I had. As annoyed as I was that they were flipped from left to right, flipped to left to right. I used to take those to school and read them when I was in high school. Those are a couple. Probably the only other 2 that I really had any deep enough fascination to own in any capacity. Next page now. Goliath-sama continues to ask, I would love to hear your fantasy book an alternate story route for DB, like where you would have changed certain things at certain points in the story and send it in a more interesting direction. And that is a question that would probably take hours to go into. And again, it's not something that I really have a list in my head of things that I would like to change. Things, it sounds disappointing to say, but there a lot of these things I've covered in Dragon Ball Dissection already. I don't know if I have the capacity to answer that without just sitting down for a year and rewriting the story from scratch, which I really don't have a lot of interest in doing. So I'm sorry. That's just a really tough one. Technically, it's not even a question. You just said you'd love to hear it, but I'm afraid I just have to kind of move on with this. Otherwise, I'm going to be here all until nighttime. I still have another page of this beyond this. Number 3, you ever think it could have been possible to actually let Gohan take the reins of the series? Do you think DB would have been better or worse for Gohan taking over as protagonist? And I've addressed this to a degree on Dragon Ball Dissection. It's like with number 19 and number 20, I don't really know based on what we're given, if it would have worked out fine or not. I certainly think it's possible. I certainly don't mind next generation type stories. There's that's so broad as to say, yeah, I mean, I think almost anything can be done well. There are very few things I would just say, no, that's an impossible, terrible idea, and there's no way any talented person could ever make that work. But it is. I'm not sure exactly what those circumstances would be. I liked the high school stuff. They are kind of a departure from what Dragon Ball typically is. Again, see Dragon Ball Evolution, because that sort of takes that same route. I do think that, just like with Goku, Gohan sort of becomes more one note as time goes on, that he has to people expect him to either be a fighter or be, a family man. Like, the writers and the fans can't seem to reconcile those two things. I think there is a balance to be found there where you could, Peter Parker does it, right? So, surely Gohan could be put into a similar type of role and have it be compelling. But I wouldn't know it unless I saw it. All right, Ian has some fun questions. His first one is, what would your ideal Dragon Ball video game be? I remember you saying you didn't care for a few of them, but you seem to be a fan of video games, specifically RPG, so I'm wondering if you had any ideas for what you would want if you had to make the DB story a video game. Not that I didn't say I didn't care for a few of them, more so that I just don't really play Dragon Ball games in general. I own a few. I own a few to the point where I could probably pull one out of my desk drawer right now. Oh, here's one. Yeah. No, I owned all three of these suckers. I barely ever play them anymore. Those are the only Dragon Ball games I own of the three Budokai titles. Just because back then it was such a big deal to have a locally released, wide released Dragon Ball video game. So there was certainly some appeal to that. But I'm not much of a tournament fighter. I don't like fighting games that much. It probably would be an RPG that told the Dragon Ball story well if I was interested. But I don't know. I feel like, again, to go back to earlier questions, I kind of have enough Dragon Ball. Excuse me. I kind of have enough Dragon Ball in my life as it is, so I don't really. I'm not really looking for an ideal Dragon Ball video game. It's sort of a separate part of my life, and I don't know. I'm just not terribly interested. Two, a more personal one. But when did you know you wanted to get into making video essays and reviews? What made you choose this particular creative endeavor? And I think for a more detailed answer, I go into that kind of in my future Dragon Ball dissection video, where I go into fairly detailed length about what got me into this in the first place. But no, I briefly had finished college and I had studied, in addition to acting, I'd studied filmmaking and editing. And I no longer had access to any of that equipment, and I sort of wanted to keep myself sharp. I hadn't really figured out what direction I was going to take in my life. And this was the age, this was 2008, so it was the rise of popular video essayists on the internet. Angry video game nerd and what have you. And my fiance and I at the time thought it'd be fun to do something like that, and we were planning to launch it together. Didn't work out that way. Yeah. So it was around that. It was certainly around that time, around 2008, that I decided I wanted to do that, and I've just sort of kept it going since then. 3. What, for fun, ever go through an AMV or Linkin Ball Z phase in the mid-2000s? Ever make any that you're glad aren't on YouTube or other video sites anymore, or watch any of you're embarrassed about liking now? No, I didn't. I was never that much of an AMV person. There was only one person whose AMVs I ever watched, and that was Castor Troy of Gingagiri Giri, whose stuff is still up to this day. But beyond that, I didn't really. His were all set to other J-pop type stuff. I was never never really big into Linkin Park, and never really went through much of that much of an edgy phase. I don't think. I certainly never made any for that matter. And I'm not embarrassed for liking the stuff from Castor Troy that I did like. So no, I don't think that really applies to me at all. 4. Any opinion on the band Third Eye Blind? I don't know anything about them whatsoever. I feel like so many of these questions are just me saying, yeah, I don't know what that is. Yeah, I don't know anything. I don't keep up with this stuff. I don't know. I have no idea. Sorry. Okay, Bearman's Cave asks, which Dragon Ball character do you think is the closest to remind you of yourself? Like, who do you think reminds you the most of you character-wise? And explain the good and or bad character traits you both have. Probably Gohan and Videl are two characters I tend to find I have a lot in common with. Maybe Krillin and Yamcha in the sort of lovable loser kind of way, but no, I mean like certainly as a kid I identified with Gohan because he was the kid of the group from when I was coming into the franchise, and also I was considered a gifted child, probably not to the same level that he was, but I could definitely relate to having an interest in academics and having that sort of be something that I was both good at and also was kind of I was driven to do as well, driven to excel at, although certainly not to the extent of Chi-Chi. But Videl in the sense of this, somewhat tomboyish, maybe a little bit stubborn, probably a bit too nosy for my own good. I don't know, but I definitely have a kinship with both of those characters. Also, I like pigtails, so as you should probably know by now. Random Guy asks, what's your opinion on revival era Star Trek, particularly Picard? And by revival, I have to assume you mean the current new revival as opposed to the last old revival, the 80s through 2000s revival, especially since you mentioned Picard. And in that case, I have to say I'm afraid I don't know because I haven't seen any of them. I only just finished watching Enterprise, maybe I think less than a year ago, working my way through all Trek in release order. So now I have to, if I'm going to continue that, I'm about to move on to that revival era if I ever get around to it, but I just haven't done it yet. So I have no opinion. I have no opinion whatsoever. I can't really say anything about it. What is your favorite Dragon Ball character design? I like Pure Evil Boo a lot. I could have sworn I'd prepped myself for this one, but I feel like that's been hours ago at this point. Now I can't remember if I did have an answer, what it was. I'll just say 23rd Budokai Bluma. I just off the top of my head. I don't know. I like that dress. Nice hairstyle. Nice boots. It's nice, I guess. But there's there's so many that I enjoy that I don't. Yeah, you ask me again tomorrow, and I'd probably say something totally different. And 3, what's your favorite modern 2005 onward Western video game? Western video game. That kind of narrows it down for me a bit because I don't know if I've played that many Western video games. I think there are a few. Certainly enjoyed the Beatles Rock Band. Play that a lot. Okay, no, this counts. I guess I have to say the revival Donkey Kong Country games, Donkey Kong Country Returns and Tropical Freeze, which I only just played for the first time a couple years ago when I got a Wii U. I got a Wii U specifically so I could play Tropical Freeze because I enjoyed Returns so much. I'm a big Donkey Kong Country fan. So yeah, the Retro Studios is Western, right? So yeah, that's my answer. That is my answer. Kieran asks, even one longer than usual video about GT and your thoughts / history of GT. Maybe. It might get covered in Dragon Ball Dissection again. I don't know. But I assume that question is asking if that is not the case, if I'll do at least one video on it. Maybe. I guess. I think. Perhaps. It's not off the table. I think that's the best I can give you right now, though. SS Jerry asks, would you ever consider reviewing the stories of other Dragon Ball video games like DB Online, Xenoverse 1 and 2, Budokai 2, and Battle of Z, since they all have differing stories in the main continuity? feel like I have to say this again. I'll never say never to anything, but I don't have any plans on it. I've played Xenoverse 2 for a couple of minutes. Beyond that, I have not touched any of those games, and I don't really have any interest to. I'm not saying that I couldn't be persuaded to do so, but I don't have any plans, and I currently have no interest. Editorial Entertainment asks, would you ever consider reviewing something like a book that a patron made that is both very very specific and very tiptoeing as well? I feel like you have something specific in mind. Again, I'd never say never, but just the impression I get is you want me to review something that you personally made. So I wouldn't take it completely off the table, but I would be wary about reviewing things that that my patrons have personally made, because I feel like that might get a little too personal, and I don't want to offend anybody. 2, what is your favorite Dragon Ball character design? Wait, no. Sorry, wrong question. 2, would you ever consider doing a Dragon Ball dissection of another manga work? I've kind of already had this one before, so please refer to that earlier question. I certainly would be interested in doing something. This has to be something that grabs me and that I feel I know well enough to do. Any other manga recommendations? Ranma 1/2, I guess. I don't really. People seem to think I do, but I really don't read a lot of manga or watch a lot of other anime. I really don't. So I'm probably not the best person to ask about that. Lulu 1997 Master says, "Oopsie, I'm a little late. Hopefully these questions won't be left behind." No question is left behind. Not for me. 1, somewhat continuing off my last year's question in regards to having an audience, what impact do you think you've had could have on the Dragon Ball community? Do you wish to have any impact? That's a good question. I thank you for reminding me that was your question last year, because I really enjoyed answering that one too. I don't know if I've had much of an impact or not. It's funny. I feel like I never really thought too much or too highly of my own impact until I was until I got some haters within the last year who just seemed to follow me on Twitter and really just blame everything, every opinion they don't agree with, being proliferated by other people as being my fault. It's like, oh, it's just another fan of Mistake Fusion. They started calling me Mistake Fusion, and I skipped around the house like a schoolgirl when I first heard that. It made me so happy that I had like a stupid juvenile hate name applied to me, Mistake Fusion. But yeah, I see that just a handful of people. So it could just be amplified just because I'm seeing these same people do it over and over again. Because I don't really feel like I'm big enough to have had that much of it, or at least not to have the influence they seem to think I have. Which is, if anybody says that that Goku was wrong in the Cell arc, then it must be my fault, kind of thing. And I don't think I don't know if I'm saying anything that's unique. Maybe some of my opinions are less popular than the mainstream, but it's like people. I didn't come up with Bluma. I was not the first person to use that particular translation convention. I picked it up and I carried it along, and maybe it's more popular now than it was because of me, and that's I'm flattered if it is. But I'm just saying things, and if I were to have any legacy, I'd hope that people at the very least entertained. But helps them think about things in ways they didn't before. I think that's the most I can hope for. Really, at least in terms of this particular subject matter. If I ever started making artistic works of my own for wide consumption, then hopefully I'd have more of an influence than I am with Dragon Ball, because Dragon Ball is not mine. It's not my baby, and it's a lot easier to critique somebody else's work than it is to make something as beloved as Dragon Ball is, and that's something that I never want to be dismissive of, because for any faults I could lob at its way, it's done a great job. 2, what's the most obscure topic you've wanted to cover in your channel in any capacity? Why? I I don't know how obscure you might say that it is. And to be honest, I've covered it on the channel before already. But it's my personal love, the facts of life, which I've done 2 videos of since I got this DVD box set in 2015. It is it didn't quite get the same level of respect that the Golden Girls did, even though it came before the Golden Girls. It's kind of the same thing, four girls and the bonds that they forge, the friendships they have, and their weird conflicting personality types. Just with school age girls instead of senior citizens, and it's something that that I got into when I was a teenager, and it's just really was near and dear to my heart. And in fact, in my last Q&A last year, I was wearing an Eastland School T-shirt, because that's the school that they attend in that show. So I still would love to somehow incorporate that into my channel, have anybody interested in watching it. I just haven't really had any ideas to do so. To an extent, doing video essays on the narrative components of a sitcom is not that easy, because sitcoms are not necessarily serialized or large story focused. They are gag focused. They are comedy focused. They are for the situation of the week kind of thing. That's why they call them sitcoms. So it's not a lot of depth to dive into. Even Dragon Ball is not very deep, but it is much more story focused. I guess that would probably be it. I mean, hell, a Star Wars radio drama video, which you should watch if you haven't, is fairly obscure. I mean, Star Wars itself is not obscure, but the radio dramas are somewhat. So I covered those back in November, right before Dragon Ball Dissection December, and I really think that it's something people should check out, both the video and the radio dramas themselves, because they're a lot of fun. The Parappa asks, first he says, "Hi there." Hi. Since most of my favorite stuff in Dragon Ball is filler, I'd like to know what's your favorite filler episode or filler arc of the anime. That's hard for me. That's hard for me to narrow down, because there's so much of it that I really enjoy. I've said that I really, really like all the Saiyan arc filler of reintroducing the various characters, showing their training, and more importantly, showing Gohan develop from scared little kid into someone who can take care of himself. And those adventures are some of my earliest Dragon Ball memories, so they have a special place in my heart. I like a lot of the added Pilaf stuff in the first arc of Dragon Ball, how it sort of works around existing material, especially the trailer bomb that Shu and Mai try to set up, and how it ties into Yamcha's rocket launcher. So there's some fun gags there. How the characters basically just barely miss each other. And the way the anime handles Great Saiyaman. Again, those were among the first fan sub tapes I ever got. Certainly the first Dragon Ball Z fan subs I ever got were the first 4 Great Saiyaman episodes. And I was just blown away at how different it was from anything I'd seen in Dragon Ball before. Alright. Stray asks, once DBD is done, would you ever be inclined to do a similar series on another franchise? And I'm afraid, Stray, that I've already kind of covered this, but hopefully you already have your answer on that. Something I've been talking about for a while in the last Q&A and in this one. So it's, it certainly would be open to it. I just need to find the right subject and get the time to get that off the ground, basically. Dragon Ball Dissection and Mighty Morphin Zyurangers keeps me pretty busy at the moment. So, and then finally, Willem asks, have you ever thought of releasing DBD as a podcast/audiobook series? Maybe a weird question for a Q&A, but was just wondering. I don't know how that's any weirder than any other question. It is a Q&A, and that is a Q, so I can give you the A. Answer. The answer. Don't confuse that for anything else. I'm not doing an OnlyFans right now. Although my butt is kind of nice. Anyway, what was the question again? Oh yeah, podcast. Okay. I got off on a tangent there. No, I've thought about it. I just never thought it was really necessary. I feel like I think Vegeta EX from Kanzenshu asked me that recently as well. But I feel like I have friends who've told me, the few real life friends I have who are interested in my videos have said that they, will listen to Dragon Ball Dissection in the car on their commutes. I've watched like I've just started up my phone and like put in a less visual focused video or something I've seen before, and just put it on a shelf in my car and just listen to a video while I'm driving. So I don't know. It just seems like the capacity is already there to listen to Dragon Ball Dissection if you want to. So I don't really see any need to branch paths. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But I do think there's also enough visual elements in Dragon Ball Dissection. It's not hugely like you could listen and get the gist of it, but I think there are enough visual gags that it would have to be retooled to an extent to make it exceptionally audio format friendly. And it's not the kind of work I really want to put in right now. So that's partly ties into answer number one, which is for what it is worth. It doesn't seem like there's a huge demand for it, and because of the work that would be required, it's like, why not just listen to it on YouTube, on your phone, and without looking at it if you're going to go that route. It's already there, conveniently there for you, and it can be used. So I don't know. It's not like high on my list of priorities, I guess, if you will. So that was the Q&A. Thank you for listening to me go on for, I don't even know how long this is going to be. I have like several different recording files, maybe 10 or 11 or 12 of them at this point. So this is going to be a long one, and I hope that you guys enjoy getting your questions answered, and I appreciate the support you've given me, because this is all Patreon influenced. All these questions were from patrons. So thank you for that, and I hope you got your money's worth out of this at the very least. So I will see you next time with an all-new Mighty Morphin Zyurangers, because we haven't done that in a few months at least. And then, of course, back into Dragon Ball Dissection from there. Happy New Year. Stay safe, and I'll see you guys real soon. Bye.